Heather Slusser here with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension. Today I am joined by Matthew Lippert, the Dairy and Livestock Agent for Clark and Wood counties. Matt is going to talk about the fact sheet that he helped co-author, Milk Reduction Strategies Through Diet and Nutrition. Thank you for being with us today. What was the rationale for developing this fact sheet?
So the rationale for developing this fact sheet was that some cooperatives have been calling on producers to reduce their milk production. Some milk has been being dumped, and we felt that there would be a good way to just give general suggestions on how to reformulate the diet to naturally reduce milk production and milk flow in herds. That would be one of the more effective ways to accomplish targeted milk reductions that some of the producers are being asked to do.
In the fact sheet, you discussed replacing non-fiber carbohydrates. Can you explain what this means?
Yes, so non-fiber carbohydrates are a pretty fancy term for probably the grain portion of your diet. It would be typically your corn, but it could be some byproduct feeds as well. And they generally are higher in energy and thus create more milk production than your forage, your fiber part of your diet. And so by just changing that ratio, which often sits about 50-50 in many diets, half forage, half concentrate, if we can up the forage, we can lower the energy in the diet and typically lower production. And it's a pretty benign way to go about this because the cows are actually, it's a pretty healthy option to do. It's not stressful on the cows. So another way we measure this would be on neutral detergent fiber. And we have suggested that you raise your NDF. Most farmers are working with nutritionists and have an NDF level in their diet. And that they raise that 3 to 4 points. We see many of these diets balanced out at maybe 28 to 29%, and to move those up to say 33% is a good way to be non-stressful and maybe pick up a little bit of fat in the milk and reach some of the targeted milk production reduction.
You mentioned reducing or eliminating supplemental fat in the ration. Can you explain why this is important?
Sure. So to reduce the supplemental fat in the diet is only an option for farmers that are actually feeding supplemental fat. And so where we talked about concentrate and forage, pretty much everybody feeds forage and concentrate, but there are a number of herds that don't feed supplemental fat. But if they do, this is a very effective way, again, to decrease the energy in the diet because fat is about 2.25 times more concentrated in energy than these concentrates, the corn that we were talking about. So taking that out of the diet can reduce the energy very quickly. And normally we like that fat in there to give us a margin of good energy in a concentrated form, but those tend to be more expensive calories. And so if we're asking a producer to lower production and we know they have low prices, we want to cut things that are expensive out of the diet. And so it's a really nice option to lower your fat, your supplemental fat in the diet and cut costs. It's extreme enough that you may find, if you did this for a long time, that you'd lose some body condition on your cows. So we suggested in the article that this is especially effective if you are also going from 3 times a day milking to 2 times a day milking, because the cows would probably not lose condition as fast because they've already had this other change going on.
Can you elaborate how to evaluate protein feeding and ration additives?
To evaluate protein feeding and ration additives, you know, sometimes we have the luxury of feeding more protein than we really ought to. And this is actually an opportunity to become a little more disciplined about our protein feeding. You know, we tend to group feed cows, TMRs, and so we have to feed an amount of protein. The highest producing cows probably utilize all that protein, but some subset of that group of cows don't. And so when we pull back on protein, We save costs because proteins tend to be expensive. And we only cut production on the cows that are using that protein. So it's a fairly gentle adjustment as well. Some ways to monitor if this is a good idea or not is one would be to look at the milk urea nitrogen, the MUN levels in your milk. Most producers have that pretty often tested during the month where they're shipping their milk. And if their MUNs are, I don't know, 11 through 12, 13, 14, they're in a range that they could probably be dropped a little bit. If they're above that, you would definitely consider that this is going to be, that maybe you're already overfeeding protein a little bit. Another way to look at that would just be look at the diet. And when we feed protein, we're actually not just feeding protein, we're feeding amino acids. And so a lot of diets today will have numbers on the amino acid profile in the diet. And working with your nutritionist, you might find that there's some room to lower that level based on where the diet currently sits.
Thank you for being with us today and sharing your information on how to alter the ration.